Welcome back to Rich Words Music, where today we're shooting out the Harley Benton Aeolus against my Fender Telecaster and my P90-equipped Epiphone SG Classic Worn model. And you might think I've taken leave of my senses. Why on earth would I want to compare an ES semi-hollow twin humbucker guitar against a single coil equipped Telecaster and a P90 loaded SG? But there is some method to the madness, so let me take you back and let you know how we got to this part of my story. So a couple of months ago, Harley Benton sent me the Aeolus to do a review and demo video, and as I got to play it I realised it was a supremely versatile instrument. Okay, it's a semi-hollow, it's got a big body and it's got two humbuckers, but the Tesla humbuckers are actually splittable too. They go down to single coil mode, and I found that I could get pretty much any ballpark tone from this guitar. So it won't do 100% authentic Telecaster twang, for example, but it will get you very close indeed, and you could probably fool a casual listener, even if they're a guitar player. So what I then went on to do is compare this guitar against a few others that I have and a few others that I borrowed from friends. So there's another video on my channel already where I run it up against my Epiphone Les Paul, my Epiphone Traditional Pro Les Paul from 2014, and my Ibanez Artcore AS73FM. You can see that elsewhere on my channel if you wish. And on that video I focused on the guitar's humbucking tones. What we're doing today is seeing how these Tesla pickups in the Aeolus compete against Fender single coil pickups and Epiphone P90 Soapbar pickups. And that's exactly what we're going to do. But let me just tell you a little bit about the specifications and the features of the guitars. If you want to know more about those in detail, head up to the links in the description. Check out my video on the Aeolus, my dedicated one where I go through everything in more detail. But just to run through it quickly for you now, at time of filming, it's November 2021, the Aeolus costs €400 new from Thomann. So we're at kind of top price point for Harley Benton pretty much, and that's because there's so many top end bits of hardware on this guitar. You've got a mahogany body and a flame maple cap for starters. Then you've got those two Tesla pickups, a volume control, a tone control, which you pull up to split those coils. If we go up to the neck here, we've got a flamed roasted maple neck and a roasted maple fingerboard. 22 frets on this neck. The neck has stainless steel frets. They're medium jumbo as well, and we've got a Graphtec Tusk nut too. Glow in the dark fret markers here if you're ever playing dark stages, so that's a pretty cool thing. And if you move up to the headstock, you've got Grover locking tuners too. So the combination of kind of the traditional look and the modern features and playability is probably something that's led the Aeolus to be so flexible. So let me pop that one down and I'll tell you about the Telecaster and the SG that we're running it up against today. First off, the Telecaster then. This is my trusty 2014 Fender Mexican Standard. It looks a little bit different to a standard Tele because it's had a few modifications over the years, but as it came straight from Fender themselves, it has an alder body and it has a maple neck and a rosewood fingerboard, 21 frets, medium jumbo, standard modern Fender C-shaped neck with Fender tuners on the back of the headstock there. It was a Fender Special Run limited edition which came in this beautiful satin ocean blue candy finish. It originally came with a black scratch plate too, but I took out the Fender neck single coil and replaced it with a Creamery wide range humbucker. Now this wide range humbucker does have a coil split mode too, so I'll be playing it exclusively in single coil mode the whole time during this video. So this is a Tele, it does spiky single coil tones. We all know what to expect from that guitar. So I'll pop that one down and get the Epiphone. And this is the 2020 Epiphone Classic Worn P90 SG. Again, something that you would expect from an SG type guitar. You either get humbuckers or you get P90s, and we've got Epiphone Pro P90 Soapbar pickups in this one. Now the P90 is perhaps slightly a bit away from a split coil humbucker, but what we want to do is try it out and see how it works. The other guitar I could have put in this video would have been my Fender Strat, but I thought, you know, we're getting quite close with the Tele there too, so why not try the P90? Now the Epiphone SG has a mahogany body and a mahogany neck. We've got an Indian Laurel fingerboard, we've got 22 medium jumbo frets. It's the slim taper satin D-shaped Epiphone profile that you'll either love or hate. Epiphone hardware throughout, including on the headstock there. And because it's a 2020 model, we've got that newer Epiphone headstock shape, which is a win-win for everybody, I would say. So what we're going to do now then is play these three guitars in a variety of different styles, as befits the Rich Words Music channel, and we'll see if the Aeolus can hack it with the Telecaster and the P90s of the SG. Now my rig for today is going to be my Hughes & Kettner Black Spirit 200 amp head, and we'll start on the amp's clean channel. channels. So we'll play a few different riffs in poppy, country and indie styles to see how we get it sounding on clean tones. Then we'll kick in the Greer Lightspeed for a bit of light crunch to do some indie rock and some classic rock as well. After that, we'll move to the amp's lead channel, and what we're going to do there is play some harder rock, some progressive rock and maybe some punk. Finally, we'll go back to the amp's clean channel and I shall engage the Rev G3 distortion pedal, and we'll see if these guitars can go down into drop D and chug and do full-on metal. Now, one last thing I do want to mention before we go into the playing part is, if you've never seen my Harley Benton Aeolus clips or videos before, just know this: Harley Benton sent the guitar to me with this switch the wrong way round, so it always looks like it's on the opposite pickup selector setting to what it actually is. So when it's down here, you'd think it would be on the bridge, but that's actually the neck setting. Middle is middle, and when it's up here, it's actually the bridge pickup. So don't get confused. Just listen to the sounds and you'll hear where we are anyway. If you have any questions after watching the video, shoot me those in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them. I also want to say that I'll play all the riffs on single coil settings, and I'll do a couple of humbucking tones with the Aeolus just to let you know what you've got extra if you did want to use the humbuckers. But many more humbucking tones are in the other Aeolus videos that I've done that you can find on my channel and at the links in the description. Enough talk then. This is the Harley Benton Aeolus versus the Fender Telecaster and the Epiphone P90 SG. Let's hear them now and we'll speak in more detail about them afterwards. Okay then, so that was the Harley Benton Aeolus versus the Fender Telecaster and the Epiphone P90 Classic Worn SG model, and I hope you enjoyed the tones. For me this was a fascinating exercise because I definitely had preconceived notions about how the three guitars would stack up against one another before I played them, before I did the recordings, and now I've come back to listen to those again, and actually while I was playing the guitars, while I was playing the bunch of riffs that you've just heard, I really got some fascinating insights as to how they perform and how they sound when compared and contrasted directly against one another. And I have to come straight out and say it, the Aeolus can pretty much do anything. That's a conclusion that echoes what I said in the previous videos that I've done about this guitar. You know, it won't get you 100% authentic Tele twang. You would need a Telecaster to do that, but it'll get you ballpark, and it'll get you so many different ballparks. It's actually kind of silly. This guitar is so versatile, and Harley Benton have done an amazing job on it, I have to say, and I'm not being paid to say that either. But let's go into a little bit more detail and tell you a little bit more what I think about the three guitars. And I think we'll start with the build quality and the playability too. The three guitars are all roughly the same price. So the Harley Benton Aeolus is new as of 2021 and costs €400 for people in Europe anyway. So it's going to cost maybe a little bit more based on customs and shipping charges to wherever you live, but it's around €400. And as is typical with Harley Benton, you get way more than you would imagine that you were going to be paying for. So you get Grover locking tuners, you get a Graphtec Tusk nut, you get 22 stainless steel frets, and you get these Tesla pickups. So we've got branded merchandise on this Harley Benton guitar. You know, a lot of people speak about Harley Bentons as being great modification platforms. You can buy them cheap, you can stick decent hardware and maybe pickups in them and give them a good setup and you get a great guitar. Well, the Aeolus is one of these newer breeds of Harley Bentons that sort of come pre-modded. So for €400, absolutely fantastic. The build quality on it too, straight from the factory. It hadn't been set up or anything, and it's just been perfect the 2 or 3 months I've had it. Nice low slinky action, very easy to play, no major marks on it or finish blemishes or anything like that. The only thing that I mentioned in my dedicated review demo video of this guitar is that the workmanship inside the body there is perhaps a little bit untidy, but you've got to cut some corners for €400, haven't you? So there you go. That's the Aeolus. Now the Fender Telecaster, when I bought that new in 2014, was around 400, great British pounds. So similar to 400 euros, and it's probably, you know, you can't get a Mexican Tele for 400 anymore. They're about 600-700 with the Player series that you get in 2021. And my guitar, of course, has had some modifications. So it's had that amazing wide-ranging Creamery humbucker put in the neck position, which cost around £100, I think, back in the day. So you're looking at that, you're looking at the installation price for that, and a couple of setups in the 7 years since I've had the guitar. So that's probably around 600 euro or pound value. And that guitar is and has been my favourite ever since I got it. It's my number one and I absolutely love it. It's pretty difficult to directly compare a Tele to something like the Aeolus. You know, this is an intricately built, carved top, it's semi-hollow, there's lots of components. A Telecaster is just two planks of wood nailed together and then strung up and you play it. It's really, really simple and you just can't compare it in the same way. This is more of a work of art than a Telecaster, which was a mass-produced guitar. That was the idea that Leo Fender had so beautifully back in the day. Now, in terms of the build quality of my Fender Tele, it's been great ever since I've got it. No problems with it whatsoever. It plays fantastic. It looks great. I really dig the ocean blue candy finish and it just feels like home to me. So absolutely perfect. The Epiphone SG is a 2020 model and those are around $430 or euros new at the moment. I just checked the prices and I feel that the Epiphone slightly loses out just in the quality stakes compared to the other two. You've got the mahogany body and the mahogany neck. You've got an Indian laurel fingerboard, where I would of course prefer rosewood or ebony if you can get it, and I know that it is possible. And you've also got Epiphone hardware, and the Fender Tele has Fender tuners, the Harley Benton has Grovers, and the Epiphone has Epiphones. And I do find that the hardest of the three guitars to keep in tune is the Epiphone. And the Epiphone does also seem to be more sensitive when it comes to taking it out into colder conditions. It needs a setup more frequently, etc, etc. You might have even heard it during this video, actually. I took the guitar out last week to a live stream that I appeared on the Blue Guitar channel, where we played Back in Black by AC/DC with me doing the Malcolm Young parts, for example, and Thomas Blue had to play on it too. I'll link that as well if you want to watch that. But I brought it back in my pretty cold car, and the Epiphone's action is now pretty low, and you could actually hear it was almost fretting out on a couple of the frets in a couple of the sound samples. So apologies for that, I just didn't have time to get it fettled again in time to do the video. But in terms of quality then, I feel that the Epiphone, it's really good. It's good value for money, but it's beaten slightly by the Tele and by the Aeolus in that sense. Now let's just quickly move on to the necks of the three guitars, because they're all quite different, and those are something which really affects how the guitar plays and really are key to your enjoyment of the guitar alongside the sounds, of course. Now the Aeolus has this flamed roasted maple neck, which is a thing of beauty really. It's a quite chunky C shape, it feels really good. You've got a fairly flat radius fingerboard there, so it's going to be suitable for any kind of fast playing, as well as just being really nice and easy to play chords on, up or down the neck. Being satin, it's really slinky too. Really good neck, and I pretty much feel like anyone could be at home on it. The Telecaster has that standard modern C Fender neck shape, which so many guitars these days seem to have. It's a really easy shape and form to get to grips with. I love that neck. It really feels like home for me. The frets on that guitar have always been great. It's always been really easy to play. Telecasters are so simple and so fun, so in terms of playability, no issues there. Now when it comes to the Epiphone SG, that also has a satin neck, and that's a slim 60s D-shaped neck, or that's how it feels to me anyway. It's a really nice neck to play. You've got the Indian laurel fingerboard, which during playing doesn't actually affect the guitar in any way, although like I said, I'd prefer rosewood. That's a personal taste thing, and much of it is in here as opposed to in the actual playing experience anyway. But in terms of playability, you've got an SG, which is a very nice light piece of wood. That guitar balances very well on a strap, as I demonstrate in the dedicated video I've done of it as well, if you're interested in learning about that. All three guitars are very easy to play. If you like a really lightweight guitar, you'll pick the SG. If you prefer something a bit heavier, you'll pick the Tele or the Aeolus. And if the Aeolus's body shape is too much for you, then you'll pick one of the others if you need a smaller sized body. So that much for the necks and the playability then, and let's move on to that crucial aspect of how the three different guitars sounded, because today was all about the coil split and the single coil tones of the Aeolus. And straight away you could notice on the clean sounds that the coil split tones of the Aeolus are like a pretty fat single coil tone. This guitar actually sounded a lot fatter than the Tele and the SG, and I was quite surprised by that, because I had expected the Tele to be quite a bit more sort of sparkly on the clean tones, and I'd expected the mid-range honk of the Epiphone's P90s to come through too, but the Aeolus really held its own. Now, I would probably choose the Telecaster of the three guitars if I had to have one, just to play clean tones, but you could really, if you wanted to have one guitar and play anything with it and you needed a single coil clean, you could get there with the Aeolus, no problem. The P90s are perhaps slightly different to the single coils when it comes to clean tones. They do their own thing, but they're instantly recognizable as a P90. I love those pickups, they have an amazing character to them, but they really come alive with a little bit more overdrive too. So let's speak about the crunch tones then, and for the classic rock and the indie crunch tones, I thought all three guitars sounded great, but this was actually the area where the Aeolus's coil split let it down a little bit for me. Now, the Epiphone's P90s just sound fantastic in that context. They're loud and brash, they have that mid-range push, they just come alive. I really, really love the Epiphone P90s for those tones. The Tele does that thing wonderfully too. I spend most of my time just doodling around playing indie rock and boring, weird chord shapes and stuff like that, and the Tele is my perfect partner for those kinds of tones. Now, when it came to the Aeolus doing those two, it can do it, but I just felt like they weren't as lively, the tones coming out of this guitar, compared to the Tele and the SG. Maybe you heard that a bit differently to me, because I know that tone, of course, is a 100% personal experience, and we all think certain things sound better or worse than other people. But I thought that when I did a couple of sound samples using the humbuckers on the Aeolus, it sounded better, it sounded thicker, and it just worked for me. That all said, if you had one guitar and you really needed a single coil indie rock tone, you can do it with the Aeolus, no problem, and it will get you there. And I think that it's kind of, when you do a direct comparison between a Telecaster and an Aeolus, you will notice that difference. But if you just take this to a gig, no one's really going to know. No one's going to say, hey, it would be better if you played a Tele, because they just wouldn't notice it in that way. So when we moved up to the higher gain stuff, that's when we started to have more compression in the tone, and that's when I thought that the three guitars started to sound more similar, and I thought that the Aeolus really competed really well on the single coil mode. Of course, when you get to higher gain settings, I would probably personally engage the humbuckers. And you can hear on the humbucker clips that I did as well that it does sound fatter and thicker, and really when you're playing hard rock and when you're playing metal, you want to be using humbuckers at the end of the day. You can do it with the Tele, you can do it with an SG with P90s, but really humbuckers are what it's all about. But for the higher gain stuff, my Telecaster is something which I really, really enjoy. It has a biting top end, it cuts through, but it's not glassy, it's thick, it's vital. I really love the tones of that Telecaster. I thought that the SG did a good job on that sort of stuff too, but when it came to the metal, it kind of lags behind slightly. Now with the Aeolus, with the single coil metal tones, I thought they were really good, but I just flicked on the humbuckers and realized that that is what this guitar is about in those contexts. And so in terms of tones then, overall, if I was to pick one guitar that could just be doing single coil tones, I would probably pick the Telecaster for that. But if I was going to be playing a gig where I had to rely on a guitar that could do, you know, a good approximation of single coil and humbucking tones, I would have no qualms whatsoever in selecting the Aeolus. Probably my personal choice in that context, I'd take two guitars, I'd take a Tele and a Les Paul, because that's where I'm more at home. But the Aeolus, you know, it's sort of a cross between those anyway, and it can do an amazing job there. So full marks to this guitar for the sounds, full marks for the other two. The SG is something slightly different. It's a different kettle of fish in some regards. All three guitars sound great for their own different things, but the Aeolus, in terms of versatility, it's got to win on that front. So ultimately the goal of this video has been to show us how well the Aeolus can replicate single coil tones. Now coil split humbuckers often get a quite bad rep when it comes to splitting down to single coils, but I really feel that based on the sounds that we've heard today, the Aeolus does a fantastic job, and it is a supremely versatile guitar. Now as I've said previously, I'll say it again now, if you're really going to be someone who's focused on one tone, go for that specific instrument. If you're playing Hank Marvin type Strat tones, get a Strat. If you want to play country twang Tele tones all night, get a Tele. If you want to play heavy metal and that's it, get something with a more modern high output humbucker, possibly an active EMG humbucker or something. But if you're looking for an instrument that will take you from super pristine cleans, jazzy, warm clean tones, through to classic rock, modern rock, hard rock, punk, and even through through to convincing metal sounds. With the Aeolus, you can absolutely get there. Now, as I've just said, if I were to pick one guitar purely for single coil tones, it'd be the Tele. But as an overall instrument, the Aeolus has those humbucking tones. It can do more than a Telecaster can. I like having 3 or 4 different guitars at my disposal every day. I love having my Tele, and I love having my SG with the P90s. I love my Les Paul, and I love my Strat, and I love the other guitars that I've got there behind me on the rack too. But if I was to have to reduce down to just one, it's quite possible that the Aeolus would absolutely be on my shortlist there, because it is a wonderful instrument. I'll just tell you a little bit again about the other videos that I've done with it as well. It held up very well against the Les Paul and the Ibanez Artcore as well on the humbucking tones. It held up very, very well against the Harley Benton HB35 Plus for semi-hollow 335 type tones. There's almost nothing that this guitar cannot do. And in that context, I would have to say that it is probably one of the best buys that you can get currently in the Harley Benton and in the overall €400 or thereabouts budget price point for electric guitars. Don't let me be the overall judge though. I mean, I would suggest that if you're looking at something like this, get one in or try a friend's first before you absolutely 100% commit if you can, because you know it might not be to your taste, who knows. But for me, I have to say that this guitar really does the job. I'm really happy to have had one for a couple of months. It's going to be going back to Harley Benton unfortunately, but there you go, them's the breaks sometimes. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope it's given you an insight into how well these coils split down and to how good the Aeolus is as a single coil type guitar. But if you have any more questions about it, or if you want to know anything else about anything related to music or guitars or whatever, feel free to ask me in the comments and I'll be happy to answer to the best of my ability. If you're still watching this video, please drop me a subscribe and a like, because it really helps the channel, and I'm happy to have you all here in this little community that we're starting to build up a little bit. I've got plenty more similar videos to this one comparing the Aeolus, many other guitars. I do stuff with amps, I do stuff with pedals, I talk to a lot of cool people in the industry too. But that's been it for today's video. I've been Rich for Rich Words Music, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.